Good Thursday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Browns OTAs in Berea, wrapping up the second week of the organized team activities. Media availability today. The reason is because it was a day where Deshaun Watson was scheduled to throw, and members of the media want to see him throwing, so here he is. That one was to Michael Woods, also trying to come back from injury of his own. Watson went through the drill portion of it, didn't do the 7-on-7s, did exactly what he was scheduled to do relative to throwing the football. Again, you see him finding Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman. This one, again, this one's a really nice one, actually, to Elijah Moore. Let's welcome in Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns Coverage. Quincy, he's throwing. He's on schedule. That right now, it's a big check mark on schedule.
Yeah, I mean, just the only thing with this injury you were really concerned about was it going to heal properly? And it seems like it's healing properly or it's healed properly. So after that, we know Deshaun Watson can throw the football. If he looks like he's going to recover well, then that's really where my concern starts to kind of drop off. So, the fact that he's throwing, the fact that he looks like he's out there without a brace, the fact that it's not been reported that there's been any complications with that recovery and that he is recovered, and now it's just about working back that muscle back to peak form. Now it's not the time to be concerned about micro analyzing, was this throw perfect or that throw perfect, because everything seems to be on the right track. Now it's about, can he stay that way for the rest of the season? And
again, we were told they were going to be conservative going through the summer, even to get that rehab at the his doctors want him to take it slow, so he's taking it slow. Today was also the first time since he was hired that we got to hear from Ken Dorsey. Dorsey talked about the importance of the work that's going on with Watson relative to the offense.
He's not getting the live reps out there on some of those 7-on-7 periods and things like that we're doing. But I think Kevin does a great job the way he structures practice in the off-season program, one, with the rules and doing what we're allowed, but then two, that really allows Deshaun now to get some reps too, from not just strictly standing back behind a mental space. So I think it's a really good combination right now of him getting mental reps, him getting some of the live reps, quote unquote live reps that he can get in a more of a jog through tempo, and then obviously the routes and the throwing when he can't get in on his throwing days.
Again, Quincy, it is kind of important that he's able to at least be out there while they're putting the pieces parts of a new offense. And now it's an offense tailored around his skill set that reportedly will look a lot like what he ran with Bill O'Brien in Houston.
Yeah, and because of that, I wonder how important is it that he's actually throwing in this? Is just making sure that he's mentally present. This is stuff he's physically done before. And it's just good to have him out there working with Ken Dorsey just to make sure that they can build on the chemistry where, where Ken Dorsey can install something, Deshaun can look at it and see how it's being ran by Jameis on the 7-on-7s and say, hey, I'm not sure if I love the depth of this route. Is that something that we could change? Let me see how it looks like when I'm back there, and see if that depth is right for me. That's the small kind of tiny stuff that does get worked on and does get worked on effectively at OTAs, especially when your quarterback can't throw. So just because he's not throwing the ball, that there's a lot of work that can get done there with the collaboration between those two.
Now, I know you've addressed this on your show. Is Deshaun Watson at his best good enough for the Browns?
Absolutely. Look, if Deshaun Watson is playing at his best, he would put up the 2020 season he had was equivalent to a Dak Prescott season last year. But it would be perceived in the same way we perceive Joe Burrow, because we don't take Dak Prescott seriously because of his postseason failure. Deshaun Watson does not have that same thing. People forget, before Joe Burrow was in the league, Deshaun Watson was who we talked about like he was Joe Burrow, right? He was the clutch guy. He was the young guy with the Midas touch, the guy who could fix everything. It's kind of how we viewed him. Obviously, injuries / off the field situations have taken that from him and given that to Joe Burrow. But if he does play well, I mean, you're talking about somebody who can deliver in big time moments, while also putting up the big time numbers, that's somebody who could get MVP votes if he's playing at his best.
So, do you think the 2020 season was overrated? Again, I know you've addressed this, so I'm curious to your answer.
I used to think that the 2020 season was overrated because you look at somebody who wins 4 games and throws 4,500 yards, and you think to yourself, well, the defenses had to stink that year, and maybe it was a light schedule, and maybe he got the ball a lot because of how bad that defense was. They were just giving up big plays. None of those assumptions are true. The defenses he played, I mean, he played a pretty average pretty average schedule, not bad, not worse. So pretty league average roster according to rankings on passing yards allowed and rankings on PFF grade for coverage. So it's not like he played a bunch of bad secondaries. You go to that second assumption, well, maybe he got the ball a lot. That's absolutely not true. You know that the year that Deshaun Watson almost threw for 5,000 yards, the Houston Texans actually had the least offensive snaps in the NFL that year. So he did that while getting less than 100 total snaps on offense, which I think is impressive, right? And then you ask yourself, well, maybe he got all of these numbers while stat padding, right? It was all blowouts. They had a point differential of -5, so they weren't getting blown out a lot. Like, those numbers are legitimate, and when you look into the 2020 season, you want to ask why they lost so many games despite having great quarterback play. Deshaun Watson had 36 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Pretty good stat line. Did you know the Houston Texans defense that year, just the secondary alone, gave up 33 touchdowns and like 3 interceptions? Also, their rushing defense gave up 2,526 yards and like 25 touchdowns. That's what, to be honest.
Yeah, again, it's interesting. You look at the 4 wins and you equate that, but when you go a little bit deeper, it's really interesting. All right, this is folks were wondering. Mike Vrabel his title is defensive consultant, so similar to what Jim Schwartz did with the Titans. And take a look today out in Berea OTAs. Mike Vrabel. Getting involved in a little bit of everything. He was helping out with special teams, helping out with defense. So it's definitely good to see Mike Vrabel involved. He's a heck of a head coach. Jim Schwartz talked about Mike Vrabel.
I've been very vocal about the respect I have for Vrabes and the relationship that we have, and I think it's awesome to have different sounding boards, having guys with experience in, different things. I know he's been a big help to Kevin. Kevin's been pretty vocal about that. And, have you guys talked to Bubba yet? Yeah, I'm sure Bubba's said the same thing. Anytime you can add experienced guys that have Coach of the Year trophies, I think it's a good thing for us.
With players, because they know Mike Vrabel, and Vrabel does have a really good reputation across the league.
Yeah, and it goes back to, I remember when I was sitting on this show after they had fired not Jim Woods,
Joe Woods.
but after they fired Joe Woods, right? We had a conversation about what they needed to do and what they needed to add to that locker room, because there's clearly some issues with how they were managing it. And one of the things I harped on was, hey, they need to have more people there to get more perspectives of these guys in the locker room, more guys with different approaches. And I think that's what they've been key on doing ever since the whole Joe Woods thing. When Kevin came here, it was a lot of guys who had the same background as Kevin and the same kind of demeanor as Kevin. Now you look at that staff and it's a lot of different demeanors on those sidelines. It's a lot of different flavors of personality for different players to go to. And we saw how well this locker room gelled together last year, and I think Mike Vrabel is another part of that, where it's like, hey, there's some guys who might not be able to get it from Jason Tarver, even though he's one of the best linebacking coaches in the NFL. But Mike Vrabel speaks to him, maybe that's a way that's a way you could get the same point to that guy that hits. Communication's a weird thing, and sometimes it takes us getting the right message from the right person at the right time. And Mike Vrabel is somebody who could definitely deliver a message that people are going to listen to. So the more guys you have in that building that your players are going to listen to, the better your team's going to be. Because the most difficult thing about coaching, right, is getting people to listen to you.
Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Now I can step aside, take a quick time out. We'll hear more from Jim Schwartz, talk a little bit about that defense. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Moneymaker from the Ohio Lottery has no interest in beating around the bush. Money Maker. You play the game, you could win money. Up to $2 million. With more than $88 million in prizes from $50 to $500. Moneymaker cuts right to the cash. Unlike this guy.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Browns defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz on the difference year two in his defensive scheme.
I mean, we're obviously in a different spot because we have a year in the system. So I think what that affords us is the ability to work on more change-ups. Like, we're a fastball team, right? We do what we do. We try to do it really well. But there were some things that we sort of held back last year, just from a standpoint that we sort of triaged it and said, okay, what can we reasonably expect to get good at and to master in one off season? So we had to sort of pick and choose, but that now gives us a little bit of time because now we don't have to work on the fastball. Now we can add different pitches, and you guys will get tired of my baseball analogies, but really that's what it is. We don't want to get away from the fastball, but it does give us a chance to work on some change-ups and some secondary pitches and add to our scheme. Like, just in general over my years, it seems like you sort of, I guess, rotate 20% of your schemes every year, right? Some things fall out of favor, some things lose their effectiveness, and then there's some new things that start trending across the league. So, I mean, that's just natural.
And Quincy, there was the thought that they needed to be able to do some things just a little bit differently. It kind of answers that question a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that one of the main things you're going to see from this unit just being together and being asked to run the same defense for the second year is you're going to see better chemistry in that secondary, because that's where the Browns ran into some issues. It'd be in man coverage. Grant Delpit takes a couple extra steps when he shouldn't. That makes him run into Greg Newsome. Greg Newsome runs into him, which makes him run into Denzel Ward, which means that there's an open tight end down in the right corner of the field. So it's things like that too that I think are going to get better with year two of Jim Schwartz, where these guys are going to be comfortable running man at the clip that they are running it and understand how they can run man without really getting in each other's way, and just be better at understanding what their zone coverage responsibilities are, right? There's going to be less questions of who takes this in this situation, or there's going to be, since you had 17 games in that system, now you don't really get caught off guard when a team throws something that's kind of new to you. You've seen something at least similar to it, so you're like, okay, I'm gonna just cover it like that. We'll just do it like that. It makes adjusting easier because you have more things to kind of roll back on and say, hey, we could do what we did last year in San Francisco, but instead let's move the safety to this spot. It just makes all of those things a lot easier. And it's not going to be something that's super noticeable at first, but it's something that you'll notice, hey, they do a better job adjusting in the second half. And it's not because the adjustments are crazy. It's just because they have a deeper catalog of data with each other to be able to make those adjustments off of.
So we've been talking quite a bit, and I know you've mentioned this before. We're always looking, who is going to be the 1A to Miles 1? And you have an interesting thing, and you kind of have come back to it. Who do you think that next guy that really wreaks havoc on opposing offenses can be in Browns defense?
I think it's going to be JOK. Look, when I have this analogy, it's hard to swat a fly if somebody is holding a gun in your face, right? And Myles Garrett is a proverbial gun in your face. You are worried about the threat. You're not worried about what is going on around you when the gun is in your face. That's how deep offenses choose to cover Myles Garrett. They are worried about him. So that means that JOK can buzz around and pretty much get wherever he wants a lot of the times and take advantage of that. So I think JOK is going to be somebody who is going to be able to kind of use and play off that attention that Myles gets. And I think the reason I point to him specifically is because he's quick enough to take advantage of that. When you talk about teams giving the Browns 1 or 2 second drops to get rid of the ball, just to avoid Myles, you need somebody who's extremely quick and instinctive to be able to take advantage of that. And I think if JOK becomes more of a short tackler, I wouldn't be surprised if he comes in with the season that's like 8 or 9 sacks.
Yeah, and Jim Schwartz will find a way to put him in situations where he can maximize that without question. This is from the Bleacher Report, ranking the best cornerback duos ahead of the 2024 season. Number 1, they go Trevon Diggs and Deron Bland from the Cowboys. Number 2, Martin Emerson and Denzel Ward. In 2 out of his 6 campaigns, Ward has allowed a completion rate lower than 49%. Last year, he surrendered a 56.2% passer rating. In his second year, Emerson emerged as ball hawk, leading the Browns in interceptions with 4, tying Greg Newsome in pass breakups with 14. I don't know that I'd trade Diggs and Bland for Emerson and Ward. And I know Bland had a ridiculous season where he had so many, he had all the pick sixes and that, and I think that probably pushed that pair ahead of the Browns. You throw Greg Newsome in there, and they have the best cornerbacks in the league.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Trayvon Diggs, Martin Emerson are kind of similar in how up and down they are, but none of those corners up there, all 4 of them in that top 2 ranking, don't really hold a candle to the consistency and dominance that Denzel Ward can offer you. I mean, this is a guy who has made some of the best wide receivers disappear in games. Just look at what he did in that San Francisco game, if you need an example of that. And then you also have somebody back there like Greg Newsome to throw at the slot position. Don't forget other pieces when you talk about this secondary, like Grant Delpit. I mean, when's the last time we were worried about a tight end? It wasn't last year while Grant Delpit was on the field. Mark Andrews didn't really do much in both the games where Grant Delpit was healthy. So, yeah, I think this secondary, they are as good as anybody in the league, if not better than anybody in the league. And then when you add that on top of having the best defensive lineman in football, if not the best defensive player in football, Myles Garrett, you have a recipe for disaster for a lot of opposing offenses.
All right. Do you think the Browns will add any more free agents? I know you've addressed this on your show.
I don't think so. There just isn't room. Right, like I know the names people will gravitate to are Unique Ngakoue or somebody like that, but look at this edge room right now. You have just starting from the bottom, Isaiah McGuire, who's the draft pick that you eventually want to get some playing time, right? You got Alex Wright, who showed some promise. You got Obo Okoronkwo, who really showed some promise last year. You have Zadarius Smith. You have Myles Garrett. Who are you going to get rid of to add Unique Ngakoue, who has not been good since 2019? I don't know. There's just not a lot of room for anybody to be added on to this Browns roster. They're pretty much set. They have guys who are young in positions where they want young guys to kind of take that spot or at least get a chance to take that spot. But I just don't see a gaping hole on this roster where they need a veteran to step in right now.
So the question is the rebuild done then? You went through – what was it, 1-31? I can't. Is the rebuild done?
I would say what Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski set out to do in 2020, right? What they plan to do and have this team at, they are there. They have roster-wise rebuilt this team, and this is the first time since 1999 that the Cleveland Browns have completed a rebuild. Now, the results have to be good, but the rebuild's done. I mean, these players are 27, 28 years old. This is a team that's clearly structured to win now. We're not mortgaging for draft picks. This team and this franchise is basically saying, hey, we are done rebuilding. We did all this stuff. We got all of the major pieces. This is going to be the core of what we're going to roll with for the next couple of years, and we're going to hope that we can get a championship in there.
Yeah, it's time to win, without question. It's time to win. Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out, other side of the break. We'll hear more from Ken Dorsey, talk a little bit about wide receivers, especially Amari Cooper. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. Today, the coordinators talked out at OTAs in Berea. Offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey on how playing quarterback has helped him and affected the way he acts as an offensive coordinator.
I like to think it does help because, when you're watching film and you're watching it from the side view and the back view and that wide angle, things look so different than from that perspective from under center. And it's like, oh, why, just throw that. Well, it's like, from that view, it doesn't look the same all the time as that wide angle view. And when you can rewind it a few times and everything. So I think there's a understanding of some things are realistic, some things aren't from a what you ask those guys to do standpoint sometimes. And then just the understanding of, hey, comfort level of that position is so important. They got to feel comfortable and confident in what they're doing because they're the ones pulling the trigger at the end of the day. So we got to make sure we're getting those guys to that point where they feel 100% ready to go and rip it and just able to react and not think about things.
Quincy, I like hearing that. I think that is 100% accurate to have a quarterback succeed. That's kind of the mindset of setting your quarterback up for success.
Yeah, you got to understand what makes that quarterback good. Sometimes some offensive coordinators think of it as, hey, what makes my offense good? And they kind of work from that assumption of how to mold a player into that. But when you got a player that you're willing to pay $230 million to, somebody that you feel like has had an MVP caliber season in 2020, you want to build that around what they do well. And it's always good to make sure that you have guys who can do that. And not just have guys who could do that, have guys who have proven track records of figuring that out, which Ken Dorsey does have.
Yeah. So I know you've talked about this as well. Do you think Amari Cooper helps the Browns get the most out of Jerry Jeudy?
Yeah. I think two things can be true. The best version of Jerry Jeudy this year. But I think it's also important to remember that Jerry Jeudy, at least in year one, is still going to be Jerry Jeudy. And what I mean by that is he's still going to have some of the issues that he had in Denver. Now, they might not pop up as much. They might not be as big as a problem in Cleveland as they were in Denver. But, there's still going to be stuff that was negative in his tape that still shows up. So I don't want people to come out here and expect him to be a completely new wide receiver, Amari Cooper Jr., because that's not who he was. But he will be somebody who benefits from just having, I think leadership that he really trusts in Amari Cooper. Both guys from Florida, both guys Alabama alum, both guys seem to be pretty cool. And when you do have that kind of mentorship, I do think that helps. It's just him being in a new city, man. Like we saw when he got traded here and how people reacted to him getting just a little bit of money. Like we just saw Nico Collins get $25 million a year. And people was reacting like Jerry Jeudy got 25 when he got 17 million a year, right? And that's all because of how they felt about him in Denver. And it just seems to me like just being out of Denver where people are that mad at you is probably a good thing for him.
Yeah, along those lines, it's going to be interesting to see if the Browns extend Amari Cooper. Final year of his contract. Wide receiver market, you kind of touched on it. It just keeps getting more expensive every day. Jalen Waddle is the newest extension, 3 years, $84.75 million. Nico Collins, 3 years, $72.75 million. A.J. Brown, 3 years, $96 million. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 4 years, $120 million. Smith, 3 years, $75 million. There's Jerry Jeudy, 3 years, $52.5 million. Pittman, 3 years, $70 million. Mike Evans, 2 years, $52 million. Two questions here. Do you think Andrew Berry tries to extend Amari Cooper? And every time, this wide receiver market, it's not going down. We haven't said Jefferson, we haven't said Hill, we haven't said Chase, and we haven't said Higgins. Those guys are getting 30, 40, between 30 and 40 million a year. And if you don't think that pushes up the middle and bottom end of the wide receiver market, the wide receiver twos, you're kidding yourself.
Nico Collins getting $25 million a year. It just destroys the market, right? Because he had one good year. So it's almost impossible for any agent that's worth their salt to be like, hey, man, like Amari Cooper has had 2 seasons like Nico Collins won. He should get at least 26, right? So I do think the price of a guy like Coop probably went up just this weekend from 22, 23. Maybe you can get, like, if you structure it with a lot of guarantees down that low, now probably you're sitting at $26 million a year for a guy like Coop.
And the Jeudy contract, again, Andrew Berry was ahead of the curve there, because if you let him get, everybody wanted to, well, why are you doing it now? If you waited and he had a productive season, he's up in the $25 million a year range.
He would be well above it, because if he does have a productive season, just look at what Nico Collins had, right? 2 400-yard seasons, 1 1,300-yard season. Let's say Jerry Jeudy finally gets a 1,300-yard season. Now you add that on top of the fact that he's been a 800-yard wide receiver pretty much his whole career, so there's less boom or bust potential with him. He's about as young as Nico Collins, and he's higher pedigree because this is a first-round draft pick and somebody that people thought would be one of the best wide receivers in that draft. So you're probably talking about a guy who can get like $30 million if he has that kind of year.
All right. Again, I know you've done this on your show. David Njoku, he's intriguing. Can he be the best tight end in football? Can he be among them?
Yes, if he fixes 2 things. I think he's already amongst the best tight ends in football. He's the best yak tight end in football. He's a pretty good all-around tight end. But there's 2 areas where David should be better at. One, his catch percentage is just not great. He doesn't come down with the amount of targets that he has. And that partly could be due to the Browns. Like, I think you probably need to do a better job of getting him targets. The Browns threw him a lot of sit routes this year, which I understand why you would do it. But just get more creative with how you get David the ball, and I think that will be fine. The other area where David needs to be better is contested catches. And look, David Njoku's a pretty okay contested catch guy. He's not bad. He's not great, but he's not bad. But Dave, you take one look at David Njoku and tell me that shouldn't be the best contested catch guy. He has a 37-inch vertical. He has the best broad jump in like draft combine history or something like that. He's 6'5". He's strong. And he has he also has super long arms. He should be one of the best contested catch guys in all of football, and he's just average. That's where if I'm David Njoku, I figure out whatever it is I need to figure out to come down with that, because the things that do separate David Njoku from a Mark Andrews, from a Travis Kelce, are those times where he has a pass and you're like, oh, that should have been a touchdown, but David gets the ball wrangled out of him in the last minute, and no, it's not a drop, but it sure feels like one.
Yeah, and to take it even a step further, he is able to do that with contested catches. Then he becomes your red zone go-to guy. That's what ultimately he should be, a red zone go-to guy, especially in this offense.
Yeah, you imagine what the red zone defense would be like if we already seen Deshaun Watson is super effective in those red zone situations. He also was pretty effective in 2-point conversion situations. So you know that you have that threat. You have Nick Chubb as a threat. You have Amari Cooper as a threat. If you can add David Njoku as another heat-seeking missile that those guys have to worry about at a high level, then you're going to really put these defenses in a bind.
Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll talk a little bit about Deshaun Watson. We'll also hear from Jameis Winston. Sports4CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Chris Sims, former NFL quarterback. This is from NBC Sports. Chris Sims unbuttoned. What has bothered him about Deshaun Watson's play?
When I really started to break it down this weekend even more, is just to go, the throwing is so inconsistent. The throwing, right? He can make a wow throw, but like we've talked about with other quarterbacks in the draft process or whatever, there are so many missed errant throws or throws where you go, wait, this guy's open and he has to go to the ground or go behind his back to catch the ball. He has plays, Ahmed, where he throws the football and I swear to you, he's bent over like a pitcher coming off the mound.
I mean, that would indicate to me, and he has had shoulder injuries. That's exactly what it was. Shoulder surgery, rotator cuff injuries. It's like you wonder if there's some permanent damage that has been done or enough damage to where he has changed his throwing motion and now he's less confident.
I think there could be that, and then you couple that with not playing, right? And, you know, he's just kind of lost his comfort level. It's almost like he's lost his natural instincts as a player.
We'll get to the injury thing in a minute, Quincy. I think part of the problem it's the mechanics, and the mechanics are because he was not in, that it was play 2 games, out 2 games, play a game, out a game, in a half, out a half. You need to get the consistency of being able to practice and throw to get your mechanics where they need to be. We'll get to the injury thing here in a minute, which is not correct even a little bit.
Yeah, and I think also he was being asked to kind of not change his mechanics, but utilize his mechanics in a different way, where in Houston, it was a little bit more loose with where his feet had to be and where the ball got released in his drop. This offense that he was in with Alex Van Pelt and Kevin Stefanski was a little bit more strict on, like, hey, make sure you get rid of this at the top of your 5th step. Make sure you get clean here. So he probably was thinking about his feet a lot more than he ever had in his NFL career. And you know how mechanics work. When you're thinking about, like, I don't know if you play golf or anything like that, but when you're thinking about getting your golf swing right, that's when you shank a lot of balls, like, because you're really trying to get in motion instead of getting in rhythm. And I don't think he got a lot of time to get in rhythm. We saw when he did get in rhythm, these things weren't an issue, when he wasn't thinking about his mechanics as much. And I think that's what Ken Dorsey is here for, to make sure that he is not in a position again where he is thinking as much about his mechanics as he was coming back. And a lot of that is rust, right? When you haven't done something in a while, it doesn't feel like natural to you as immediately as it used to, right? You're like, is this the right foot? Am I going off the right foot? Like, this don't feel right. And I think that really affected him. So yeah, I think you're right. I think he needs more snaps, more reps out there. And also just needs to be doing stuff that he's a little bit more comfortable with, because when you're coming off of a 700-day delay and then you're learning an offense, it's not like majorly different, but how you're applying your mechanics is a little different. Yeah, you're gonna look a little awkward there because it's like trying to learn how to salsa when you only know how to two-step.
All right, so relative to his injury history, a lot of Browns fans have mentioned, he's injury prone. These are the injuries that he's had going back to high school. He had a fractured hand, a little bit with the lung and the oblique, the knee, he did have an ACL, the shoulder, that's the current one. So his injury risk, and they do these for all the NFL players, it's actually very, very low. Projected games missed in 2024, they say 1.1. Browns fans will take that in a heartbeat. Here, if we go a little bit further, these are some of the injuries that he did have. The one that I completely forgot about is he had a slight crack in his collarbone back in 2014 when he was at Clemson. He had the LCL sprain, he had the torn ACL, back injury. Then the rotator cuff in the throwing arm was last year, re-aggravated that, and he had the broken bone, the glenoid, which every Browns fan has now learned about. But this isn't a guy that's been injured. I mean, for a quarterback, that is relatively injury-free.
Yeah. I think it's more of a concern about him getting older. But yeah, Deshaun has demonstrated that he's able to stay healthy and that he's not like built fragilely. Like he's not consistently missing 2 or 3 games a year or something like that to where you would be concerned, right? I think Sam Bradford is like who comes to my mind when I think of a fragile quarterback, and that's not really been what Deshaun thing has been in the NFL. So yeah, I don't know what Chris was getting at there with the whole like maybe he's been like chronically injured with his throwing arm. I think he's just kind of he's thinking a bit much there to figure out why Deshaun was a little bit inconsistent mechanically. I think the answer is obvious when you look at what he was asked to do and what he was coming back from. And when those inconsistencies showed up, because also, I'm pretty sure Chris, if he were sitting here, would also mention the last 3 games that 2 games that Deshaun Watson played in, those issues weren't really as prevalent as they were like in the first couple weeks of the season. So you got to ask yourself, maybe that was just early season stuff where a lot of quarterbacks have issues just kind of slipping into their mechanics and making sure that they're clean with their mechanics while getting rushed, because it's just the beginning of the season. Deshaun Watson has so much around him that we kind of like dismiss that the things that could be affecting him are the same things that could be affecting every other quarterback, but he is still a normal person. So like maybe that's what was affecting him.
And it's important to note, Sims is a guy that thinks highly of Watson. Relative to, the rankings and all that until this season. So we'll see. So former Florida State Seminole and first overall pick, Jameis Winston. He's now the Browns' backup quarterback. On what it's been like for him to work with Ken Dorsey, who is from the University of Miami.
One, the most important thing I learned is that, Miami Hurricanes aren't that bad. But really, I've really enjoyed his coaching presence. What we do on the field in terms of drill work has been fine work. One of my favorite quarterback coaches that worked with Peyton Manning, Clyde Christensen, Mike Bajakian, they always worked on the feet. And I'm just so happy that is what he's emphasizing with his feet, with his timing, and also him installing the plays, him calling the plays. Man, he's definitely been in this position. It seems as if he's been in this position before, and I'm just happy that we're able to communicate. And it's very important to me because this is a new offense for me. So us communicating, me continuing to learn, and him being tough on us and challenging us to get better, challenging us to be quicker and faster, it's truly been a blessing.
Again, Quincy, the reason I play that, Dorsey's a really good quarterback coach. At the Combine, people said he's good offensive coordinator. He is a phenomenal quarterback coach. So that should help Deshaun Watson as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely should be something that helps Deshaun. Jameis as well. A good quarterback coach helps your wide receivers too, right? And I think he's going to have a huge impact in that area. I think Ken Dorsey was a really underrated hire, kind of in the same way that we felt the same way about Jim Schwartz, right? Because it's funny now, people act like hiring Jim Schwartz was like the easiest hire the Browns could do because it worked out. But that was not who a lot of people were suggesting the Cleveland Browns should hire immediately. We had those conversations. Jim Schwartz was somebody we were all ultimately fine with, but it was not the number one name on the list, and there was actually a lot of people disappointed when they announced that they hired Jim Schwartz. And I think it was similar with Ken Dorsey this year, right? A lot of people were disappointed, but I think a year from now, we're going to look at that and be like, well, that was the obvious choice. That made the most sense given what his track record was. So, yeah, I think Ken Dorsey, we don't know what happened with him in Buffalo as an offensive coordinator, but we do know what his former quarterbacks say about him, and it's almost unanimously great stuff. And Cam Newton doesn't go out of his way to praise a lot of his former position coaches. So the fact that he's doing that for Cam tells you everything you need to know.
Quincy Carrier, as always, great stuff, man. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Quincy.
Y'all have a great day.
Quincy Carrier, make sure you check him out. Untitled, unfiltered Browns coverage. Always really good stuff. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Moneymaker from the Ohio Lottery has no interest in beating around the bush. Money Maker. You play the game, you could win money. Up to $2 million. With more than $88 million in prizes from $50 to $500. Moneymaker cuts right to the cash. Unlike this guy.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Browns' new offensive coordinator, Ken Dorsey, talks about maximizing Deshaun Watson in this year's offense.
It's going to be a constant evaluation to make sure we're doing the right things. That's part of developing an offense and coaching, to making sure we're maximizing our personnel as much as possible. And of course, that starts with Deshaun. So we're constantly going to be evaluating that, making sure we're doing the right things, especially as he gets out there and those reps continue to grow from a full speed standpoint.
Ken, when you see him throw the ball, like today was the first time we saw him live, and it looked good, but have you seen him, I guess, really push it with the arm?
Yeah, I think each day, it just keeps going, and so I think that's part of this process, and it is a process. We went through a similar thing in Carolina with Cam coming off of shoulder surgery, where we had to make sure we were monitoring distance of throws. Couldn't go past a certain yardage. How many throws he's making in practice. All those things were basically throughout the entire year. So I think where he's at right now is kind of in that process right now. And as he gets more and more comfortable, and part of that's just the mental side of things too, that, okay, I can start really opening it up more and more because of the confidence in it, you know? So I think there's a lot of that involved with it as well. But you see him continue, like, each day ramping it up a little bit more and more. He threw the ball down the sideline, you know, a vertical throw today, and, you know, that's one I hadn't seen, you know, from him a lot, because we haven't pushed him to do that. So that was good to see.
With that, let's welcome in Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Tim, again, really early in the process, but you're hearing all the right things. They're going to build the offense around Watson. It's something they have to maintain. It's something they have to continually evaluate.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in the NFL, you have to have the quarterback playing at a high level to give you a chance to go all the way to the Super Bowl. And with the Browns, with the roster that they have, they certainly have, you know, the talent on the roster to make a potential push for it. But it all starts with Deshaun Watson looking like Deshaun Watson. And Ken Dorsey talking about the experience he had, you know, in Carolina with Cam Newton, how he had to work him back in with the shoulder surgery. I imagine that kind of helps the Browns in getting Watson ready to go, understanding, you know, the particulars of being very diligent and careful with Watson's workload. Obviously, he made some throws, you know, some pretty decent throws out there. And again, it is the end of May. He's still kind of learning the offense, still trying to get some strength in an arm, trust in that arm again. So there's still work to do. Obviously, is a long way to go till the season opener against Dallas. But obviously, it seems like the Browns seem pretty happy based on what they've said with where Watson is right now in his rehab, and they're not going to push. It seems like they're not going to push it too far, too fast.
Yeah, they said they'd play it conservative and get ready to ramp it up once they get closer to the season. This from Dog Pound Daily: 3 Browns who could sign an extension before the 2024 season. Number 3, they say cornerback Greg Newsome. Number 2, wide receiver Amari Cooper. We told you how the wide receiver market's kind of blowing up financially. And number 1, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, linebacker. When you look at those, Tim, who would you prioritize? And you know what? Let's start with Cooper. The wide receiver market is going to continue to go up. Those number 1 guys, you know, Jefferson and Hill will want a new deal, I'm sure. Chase and Higgins all haven't signed yet. How likely do you think it is the Browns and Cooper can find some common ground? Cooper's an older guy at 30. I mean, it's older for a wide receiver.
Yeah, I think that might be kind of what keeps him, in my mind, from making Justin Jefferson money like we all expect he's going to get, what Jamar Chase could probably get, what T. Higgins hopes he can get from a receiver contract standpoint. But I think with Amari Cooper, I've talked about before, he's a guy where I think, you know, just because he's older, like, he may lose some of his speed as you naturally see with other players, but his game's not predicated on speed. It's predicated on intelligence, understanding where to be on the field, how to create separation for yourself, and sturdy hands, and the ability to really catch the football at a high level. That's what Amari Cooper has shown the past 2 seasons. That's why I feel like him more so, he'd be in that group where, even though he's kind of getting to 30, maybe he only has a couple more years at a high level left, I still would try to go out and get into an extension. Maybe because he's older, you can get him at a slightly friendlier price than, you know, what, like I said, what the Vikings would have to pay for Jefferson, what the Bengals would have to pay for Chase and Higgins, and all these other receivers that are out in the market and that could be looking at second contracts in the future.
So the other one would be Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I would expect they try to get something done with him, because if he puts up a year where it's even better than it was last year, that price is going up too.
100%. I feel like that's got to be something that I would, if I'm the Browns, I'd want to get that done, obviously, before camp, and just get that taken care of and not let that, you know, go into the season. Obviously, I think that has probably been arguably the best pick Andrew Berry's made through his drafting career. The only one other you could contend with is Martin Emerson Jr. But JOK, I still feel to this day he had no business falling as far as he did in the draft, and he's shown it with his ability on the field. The fact that he's so good downhill, that he's able to create a lot of pressure. I mean, you saw in that Niners game just how much he affected Brock Purdy throughout that game. That was a big reason why Purdy did not look as good as he had earlier in the season, why the Browns had a chance to win that game, in which they eventually did. But because the Browns really don't have a lot of long-term prospects right now at linebacker, JOK just looks far and away the guy, and maybe the guy you build that room around for the next couple of years. That to me should be a high priority is getting him locked up sooner rather than later.
All right, before we go to break, this is from Pro Football Focus. Top 10 AFC rosters entering 2024. They go Chiefs 1, Jets 2, Ravens 3, Texans 4, Bengals 5, Bills 6, Dolphins 7. They have the Browns 8th, just ahead of the Steelers and Jaguars. I know I'm from Cleveland. That seems awfully low. And my guess is they're weighting the quarterback position pretty heavily.
Yeah, I mean, although I would say if we're weighing the quarterback position heavily, I mean, we have to remember Aaron Rodgers is 40 years old. He's coming off a torn Achilles. I mean, those are two things. With a torn Achilles, that's typically, I've said before, it's a 2-year injury, a year to recover and a year to get back up to top speed. And because of all of that, I mean, we're expecting Aaron Rodgers to be playing at a high level when, as I said last time we talked about him, he was coming off, I believe, his worst season in the NFL, one of his worst seasons in terms of quarterback rating, if not the worst of his career. So obviously that is a huge concern. And I think for me, Aaron Rodgers should be a bigger wait and see than I think he is. I mean, when I look at the rest of the list, Chiefs, Ravens, Texans, Bengals, Bills, maybe to an extent I get. I feel like the Browns could certainly be in that debate with Buffalo because Buffalo right now, I have questions about their receiving core. They're obviously leaning on younger guys, Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman. That the rest of the roster is pretty set. And then Miami, I have real questions about that offensive line. That offensive line got banged up during the season, and it doesn't seem like they really built that group up where it needed to be. So the Browns certainly, I think, are in that second tier. How high they are obviously depends on how Deshaun Watson plays, and if he plays at the Houston level, you can certainly put them on that top tier. I think there is question as far as what he has shown because, I mean, he just hasn't played at a high level consistently since 2020, largely because he hasn't been on the field that much since 2020.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out, other side of the break. We'll hear more from Jim Schwartz, Sports4CLE. He'll be right back. Stay with us.
Moneymaker from the Ohio Lottery has no interest in beating around the bush. Money Maker. You play the game, you could win money. Up to $2 million. With more than $88 million in prizes from $50 to $500. Moneymaker cuts right to the cash. Unlike this guy.
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. Defense coordinator Jim Schwartz on where the Browns defense needs to improve.
We played really well in a lot of areas. Red zone wasn't one. And, you sort of dice that up a lot of different ways. And, red zone's one of those things that you don't get a ton of reps on. So, whatever, you flip a coin limited number of times, it can change. It's funny, I was watching a team this morning that was a top red zone defense. And I'm watching, and one game, the opponent finished by taking a knee in the red zone. That's a red zone win for the defense on the stats, There was another that they busted a coverage. A receiver was wide open, dropped the pass. Red zone win. Defense really didn't do anything to deserve that. There was another one where they kicked a field goal at the end of the game to win the game. Well, that's a red zone win for the defense on the stats. So you got to be careful a little bit about that. But that being said, we weren't good enough in the red zone. We had too many mistakes there, and that's certainly an area that we can improve on. But we're a defense. We tend to. You guys hear me. I don't talk a lot about our position, our defensive rankings or things like that, because we sort of judge ourselves against ourselves. Right, and just because whatever we were number 1 in an area or number 5 in an area. It's all about us and our improvement as opposed to what the rest of the league is doing.
And Tim, when you think about it, there should be improvement because they're in their second year in Jim Schwartz's system. I know they play tougher teams, but second year in a system, guys should be a little bit more comfortable and a little bit better.
Yeah, and especially because by and large they ran it back on defense. Obviously, Zadarius Smith coming back, Shelby Harris coming back. Obviously, you keep the secondary intact. Greg Newsome's still on board. Obviously, the biggest additions really are kind of smaller pieces and linebacker with Devin Bush and Jordan Hicks coming on board. So yeah, by and large, it's all coming together. It's all kind of back to where it was a year ago. And I think Jim Schwartz has a real good point about red zone issues. And obviously, in the NFL, teams are going to get yards. They're just going to, make 70, 80-yard drives. They're going to get in the red zone because that's just the nature of the game right now. The margin in talent between the best offense and the worst offense isn't as great as some people think it is. So, and even great defenses are going to give up yards. I mean, I equate it in basketball because you can have the greatest defense in the game, and you're still going to give up points because the other guys on the other side are just that good. So football comes down, especially in the NFL, to third downs, fourth downs, and how often you keep teams from scoring touchdowns in the red zone. And the Browns weren't as good at the red zone touchdowns as they needed to be, going up against a stronger menu of quarterbacks on the schedule this season, particularly Patrick Mahomes, Tua Tagovailoa, and Dak Prescott in particular, among the many others they're going to have to face. It's going to come down to red zone play, and if they can tighten up in the red zone more than they have, I think it's a chance for this defense to become even better, even if, because like I said, the quarterbacks are going up against are better this year. The offenses they'll face are much better. The rankings may not show, but if they are tougher in the red zone, this is still a formidable defense.
So this is from PFF, 2024 Edge Defender rankings. Number 1, they go Myles Garrett. Garrett, nothing short of sensational in 2023. League best, 94.7 pass rush grade, 27.3 pass rush win rate, one of the highest marks PFF history. Micah Parsons, 2, Nick Bosa, 3. They have Zadarius Smith, 17. 31-year-old posted back-to-back seasons with pass rush win rates above 18%. Going through back surgery in 2021, missing all but one game that season. I've said this before, and I'll probably continue to say it. It's not a mistake that Myles Garrett won Defensive Player of the Year and broke through to get that award after being close the first year that Zadarius Smith was there.
I mean, that's been part of the thing. Can there be a Robin to Myles Garrett's Batman and take some pressure off of him? Although obviously with Myles Garrett, he's always going to face extra attention because of who he is, because of his play since he's come to the NFL in 2017, and he's obviously been such a dynamic player off the edge for this defense. But now that you have a player in Zadarius Smith who's proven he's played at a high level, didn't quite have the sacks this year, but still very productive as far as pass rush win rate and pressures are concerned, that the fact that they have a guy right there who can kind of hold his own, and also the depth with Ober Okoronkwo and with Alex Reid really emerging towards the end of the season, the way it's kind of shaping up is it's going to be harder for teams to triple team Myles Garrett, because if you take so much attention away, and if you're a defense, if you have good enough guys who are more than capable winning one-on-ones on a fairly regular basis, it's kind of a pick your poison type of mentality when you're going up against this Browns defensive front. And I think the voters this past season clearly saw that even though Myles didn't have the greatest sack numbers, that he just affected the game in so many different ways. And like you said, it's just the attention that's no longer squarely on him, I think, helps him a little bit.
Yeah, and you add Mike Hall, and you add Quentin Jefferson to the defensive tackle room. Now there's even more. You add it to Harris and Hurst. All right, before I let you go, I know you wrote an article. What did the Cowboys, week 1, the Browns will face the Cowboys, what did the Cowboys change in the offseason?
Well, the Cowboys lost a lot of guys this offseason. They lost Tony Pollard, Tyron Smith, Tyler Biadasz, but most importantly, they lost Dan Quinn, the defensive coordinator, who's now the head coach of the Washington Commanders. And you look at what Dan Quinn did for the Cowboys, they were twice a top 5 scoring defense under his stewardship as defensive coordinator. They replaced him with Mike Zimmer, and obviously Mike Zimmer has had a great defensive reputation, but he hasn't been on an NFL sideline since he was the head coach of the Vikings in 2021. So he's been away from the game for a little bit. And obviously, the longer you're away from the game, the more it kind of changes. And obviously, it's changed a little bit over the last 2 seasons. When you look at what they've added, they really haven't added much. They brought Zeke Elliott back to Dallas. They also signed a solid veteran linebacker in Eric Kendricks. But because of all they don't have and what they let go, transitioning to a new defensive scheme. I feel like if you're the Browns, this is the time you want to get him. Is you want to get him in week 1 while the defenders are learning a new scheme, and while the offensive line, as I mentioned, like I said, Tyron Smith's not there, Tyler Biadasz not there. You lose 2 quality starters, including Smith, who's probably going to be a Hall of Famer, and you put them up against Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith. That is a massive, massive advantage for the Browns. That said, Dak Prescott's really good. They might have to turn this into a track meet at the moment to best beat the Browns. They certainly have the personnel to do it. It's just going to be a tall order against this defense.
Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind, Mike Zimmer, Kevin Stefanski, very familiar with him. He was a defensive. Kevin Stefanski coached under Mike Zimmer when he was the head coach with the Vikings.
Yeah, I mean, that familiarity certainly has to help. We know what kind of great defensive coordinator Mike Zimmer was and what he did with the what he did with the Cincinnati Bengals, I should say, back in the day.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. As always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tim.
You got it. Thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
Tim Bielik, make sure you check him out. Always really good stuff with the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.